This is from Mondawise. Every accusation is a confession. Israel and the double lie of human shields. Multiple human rights reports show that Palestinian armed groups do not use human shields, but Israel does. Israel's false claims about Palestinian human shields are just attempts to justify its own targeting of civilians. I mean, I think it's fair to drink while reading this because it's just so.
Yeah, it's depressing.
Yeah.
Among the most frequently deployed weapons in Israel's arsenal is the so-called human shields ruse. For decades now, Israel has systematically used this propaganda device as a trick to justify war crimes, to shift the blame for its crimes to others, to overcome the principle of distinction in humanitarian law, dehumanize Palestinian victims, and to arm its Western proxies and complicit media companies with ammunition to protect Israeli impunity. Free Palestine. But a chain of international investigations reveals two clear conclusions about these charges. First, Palestinian armed groups generally do not use human shields, and secondly, Israel does. Human shields is common parlance for a particular violation of international humanitarian and human rights law. It is strictly prohibited in all circumstances. As summarized by the authoritative commentary of the ICRC, it refers to the intentional co-location of military objectives and civilians or persons in combat with the specific intent of trying to prevent the targeting of those military objectives. The classic case is when a group of soldiers force civilians from the other side to march ahead of them into a battle zone, or into an unsecured structure, in hopes that the enemy will not shoot at the soldiers for fear of hitting the civilians. But Israel, in its automatic claim of human shields each time it kills large numbers of civilians and destroys protected civilian infrastructure, pays no mind to this definition. Instead, it simply extends the phrase to all civilian deaths. On cue and without evidence, complicit Western politicians, their official spokespersons, and media corporations then dutifully repeat Israel's human shield mantra over and over again. For Israel, refugees going about their daily lives in refugee camps, patients and doctors in hospitals, people praying in churches and mosques, and humanitarian workers delivering food to the hungry are all human shields. Never mind that they have neither been compelled by Hamas, nor have they volunteered to shield anyone or anything. And never mind that there is often no legitimate military objective in situations where Israel makes a human shields claim. If these civilians are killed by Israeli bombs or bullets, according to the Israeli narrative, it is their own fault, or that of Hamas, because they both live in the same densely populated areas. But the mere presence of armed forces or members of the enemy in populated civilian areas does not constitute the use of human shields. Indeed, Israel should carefully consider the implications of its repeated claims that it does, given that it maintains its military headquarters in a busy section of the city of Tel Aviv. Nor does the presence of fighters in a protected civilian location remove the protected status of that location. Israeli soldiers can be seen in every Israeli hospital. Does that render those hospitals a legitimate military target? Of course not. To deny the same protection to Palestinians would be both a grave breach of humanitarian law and a blatant act of racism. Needless to say, that is not how the concept of human shields works in international law. In pretending that it does, Israel and its Western proxies willfully ignore three inconvenient elements: logic, facts, and law. First, acceptance of these claims requires Israel's pliable proxies in the West to ignore decades of experience and volumes of collected evidence that Israel often makes no distinction between civilians and combatants in its military activities, and in many other cases, directly targets civilian infrastructure. Israel routinely attacks hospitals, schools, shelters, and refugee camps. Its snipers and drones hunt down and execute civilians, and its AI-guided weapons, labeled with cruel names like "Where's Daddy?" are designed to wait until targets are home with their families before bombing them. It even guns down civilians, including women and children, waving white flags. These criminal patterns are well known and well documented in the work of successive investigations by the UN and by international, Israeli, and Palestinian human rights organizations. But the very logic of human shields rests on the idea of deterrence. That is, that soldiers will hesitate to shoot if civilians are at risk. No such logic exists with a military force like Israel's that does not distinguish between civilians and combatants, and that routinely practices the direct targeting of civilians. Indeed, Israel's the Haya Doctrine, on the basis of which it has long carried out the intentional massive destruction of civilian areas as a mean of terrorizing civilian populations, is proof that Israel cannot be deterred by the use of Palestinian or Lebanese human shields. The current wave of genocide perpetrated by Israel in Gaza has left no doubt about its willingness to kill Palestinian civilians intentionally and without hesitation. And its Hannibal Directive, under which Israel kills its own citizens to prevent them from hindering its military aims, means that it may not even be deterred by human shielding with its own citizens. Given that the resistance forces challenging Israel are well aware of this, why would they try to use a tactic that they know is futile? The answer is they don't. Thus, the charge of human shields fails the test of logic, but it also fails the test of law. First, the situations in which Israel claims human shields are used do not qualify as cases of human shields under the international legal definition described above. Simply put, and as this definition makes clear, the mere presence of fighters nearby does not magically transform civilians into human shields. Accordingly, Israel's charge of human shields usually has no basis in law whatsoever. Secondly, Israel alleges human shields in an attempt to shift blame and absolve its forces of legal responsibility. But what they miss is that even if human shields were used, this would still not reduce the legal obligations of the attackers. In fact, claims of the use of human shields do not justify an attack on civilians without the constraints imposed by international humanitarian and human rights law, and the attacker still remains accountable, even if the user of the human shields is also accountable. The attacker must still respect the principles of precaution, distinction, and proportionality to avoid harming non-combatants. In other words, the declaration of human shields is not a get-out-of-jail-free card under international law. Therefore, as a matter of law, even where human shields are present, the attempt to shift blame and absolve the shooter of responsibility fails. And then there is pesky problem of facts. Israel has produced no credible evidence of the use of Palestinian resistance groups of human shields in the current Israeli attacks on Gaza. It relies instead on the uncritical, rote repetition of the charge by its Western sponsors and proxies and Israel-friendly media corporations. That is not to suggest that no Palestinian fighter has ever in history used human shields, but the charge that they do so regularly or systematically is a charge without evidence, and one regularly wielded not to hold violators to account, but rather as a justification for the commission of Israeli war crimes. At the same time, we have all seen the video footage of Israeli soldiers using Palestinians as human shields across Gaza and the West Bank. We have viewed with our own eyes the images of Palestinians, often children, tied to the hood of Israeli military jeeps, forced to walk ahead of a column of Israeli occupation soldiers, or to lead the soldiers into buildings or other structures. The practice is as old as the state of Israel itself.
Also want to point out that there is recently a video that has surfaced about a Israeli prison where they are essaying a male. They just pick him up and they take him to the corner, and multiple guards essay him, and then he has to go to the hospital because he has some devastating wounds to his anal cavity. There's video of that. Where's the video of Palestinians doing that to Israelis?
It doesn't happen.
And again, it's not to say that it's never happened ever, but there's a difference between something happening on a regular basis and one time in 50 years. It's not okay either way, but like literally everything that they're saying that the Palestinians are doing, they're fucking kids, dude. They're not doing what they're saying.
Everything Israel claims Palestinians do,
it's because
they're projecting hardcore.
Yep. And it's disgusting, and I wish we would point it out more, but instead we're just
simps for Israel. Yep, we're just a simp to Israel. I don't want to pay my taxes.
Yeah, sorry.
You wonder why I'm so pessimistic. You wonder why I don't like people.
Antisocial hermits. In every successive Israeli attack on Palestinian communities, the pattern has been the same. Israel accuses the Palestinians of using human shields. International organizations and human rights groups investigate, and the investigations reveal that the party systematically using human shields is not Palestine, but rather Israel. Indeed, the Israeli human rights group, B'Tselem, has documented the repeated use by Israel of human shields at least since 1967.
Jesus.
Investigations by both Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch into Israel's Operation Cast Lead attacks in Gaza found evidence that Israel used human shields, including children. But found no evidence that Palestinian groups did so. Similarly, successive UN commissions of inquiry that investigated the massive Israeli attacks on Gaza in 2008, 2009, and 2014 looked into Israel's claims and found no evidence of Palestinians using human shields. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child found the continuous use by Israel of Palestinian children as human shields from 2010 to 2013. The UN's Special Rapporteur on Terrorism reported the same finding. A typical finding is included in Amnesty International's investigation into Israel's caste-led attacks. In several cases, Israeli soldiers also used civilians, including children, as human shields. However, contrary to repeated allegations by Israeli officials of the use of human shields, Amnesty International found no evidence that Hamas or other Palestinian fighters did so. And in the report on the white flag killings of Palestinian civilians, Human Rights Watch confirmed that Israel says Hamas fought from populated areas and used civilians as human shields. That is, deliberately used civilians to deter attacks against Palestinian forces. Human Rights Watch found no evidence that the civilian victims in this investigation were used by Palestinian fighters as human shields. But the Israeli practice of using human shields is a matter of public knowledge inside Israel, having long been the subject of public debate. Israel soldiers, speaking to the Israeli organization Breaking the Silence, have themselves confessed to the widespread practice. It has been reported in Israeli media, most recently in an expose in Haaretz last month. The Israeli military has even publicly defended its right to use human shields in successive Israeli court cases. Of course, those instances in which it lost the argument have had little impact on the military, which continues the practice until today. Thus, Israel's disinformation tactics have been an important pillar in its strategy for the destruction of Gaza since the current wave of genocide in Gaza began almost a year ago. False charges of human shielding have been key to those tactics. But that deception crumbles at even the most cursory examination. If Western politicians and journalists exercised even the most basic level of due diligence before parroting Israeli claims, if they subjected them to the test of law, fact, and logic, the truth would be quickly revealed. The party that routinely uses human shields is Israel, not Palestine. A common refrain in the public discourse on Palestine is that every Israeli accusation is a confession. The double lie of human shields is a case in point. I could never use a child as a human shield.
But they are children.
What a bunch of fucking pussies. Fucking war criminals.
They are. Now we're complacent, and I fucking hate it.
Kamala's complacent, you're gonna see.
Jill Stein, free Palestine. I actually seen a post about her recently. You know how little Miss Ortez says she only pops up every 4 years and that she's shit. Yeah, it went through and showed her entire arrest record that she's gotten over and over and over and over for partaking in the very things that she believes in. She has literally been fighting for rights and getting arrested while Ortez is over there sucking on mommy's teat and getting a paycheck.
AOC.
They're using human shields, and that's why, civilians are dying when we bomb them all.
It's like, no, that you literally are using. It's like sheer projection, cognitive dissonance. Like, it fucking pisses me off.
Like them saying that the 6 hostages were shot right before they got there, and then Hamas is just like, bitch, you blew them up. Like, the fuck you talking about?
Or like the brand new weapons next to the blown up cradle.
Yeah.
Or the pistol they found in some hospital.
Oh.
Like, yeah, that's evidence, guys. That meant it was okay to bomb the hospital.
Remember, Netanyahu said that there's a company in Lebanon that will pay your rent if you allow them to put a rocket in your garage or in your living room to aim it at Israel. And that is happening on a mass scale. And he's going to try to Gazify them.
Lebanese.
He's already made that clear. And then throwing Syria and Iraq in there, he's just...
He wants to start World War III. He wants the USA to play a big role, and we're just walking right into it.
He wants the entire Middle East to be shifted to be just one Israel state. He doesn't want the other ones to exist, which is also, let me point out, racist as fuck, dude. All right? Why are you racist against Muslims and Arabs?
It's more like imperial, but yeah, there's a racist element too, because I hate Muslims, I hate Arabs.
Like, why? I know that we're supposed to, like, as Americans, we're supposed to hate them because, like, terrorists or some shit, but, like, white people are terrorists too. Americans are terrorists too. So, like, You can't make that kind of distinction. It's like saying that Trump represents all of us. No, he does not. Biden does not represent all of us. I will be ashamed that that is the first woman president. Just another. You could just put Hillary Clinton in there. I mean, to me, it's the same shit.
She's just slightly better than Hillary Clinton.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm
How
positive.
sure?
I'm very positive.
But nonetheless, I'm just saying, like, you might as well just put her there. It's the same shit. They're both going to be down with like war. They're both going to be like all over Israel and do whatever they want. And
Yeah, but then he wants Trump to win because
he's psychotic
fucking yeah, I don't know.
and a puppet.
Mhm.
So, I mean, him finding out that Ukraine has oil, I'm pretty sure he's going to backtrack and support Russia invading Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine has oil. We'll probably invade them.
Guess what? America has oil too.
Yeah, we make the most. Number one, baby.
And that's why our gas is so high. Yay!
That's because we export like 60% of it. That's why.
Oh, so we don't even use our own shit?
I would tax the fuck out of that, dude.
I-
Export your oil out of the country. Fucking tax 40%, 60% tax on that shit. Fuck you.
especially and you know, not to also mention that taxation, if you run your shit through a goddamn reservation, that taxation goes straight to the reservation and you have to build your pipeline elsewhere. Internationalism, not nationalism. Einstein's based.
This is from Reuters. Israel is not facing effective pressure, Greece says.
Israel is not facing sufficient pressure to end the war in Gaza, and the escalation in Lebanon is a minefield that the international community may not be able to deal with, Greece's foreign minister said on Monday.
I need a bib.
Greece was elected as a member of the United Nations Security Council for 2025 to 2026 earlier this year, and Athens believes the country's historical ties with the Arab world and Israel give it credibility to act as a peace broker. It seems that there is no effective pressure upon Israel. We are friends of Israel, and we're strategic partners of Israel, and we're trying to be as open and sincere with them. George G. told Reuters in an interview on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Let's just remember that South Africa was just like, bro, do you see what they're doing?
Yeah, South Africa was like, that's genocide and apartheid. What the fuck?
We get in trouble for that. Look at them. Greece condemned the October 7 attack by Hamas Islamist militants against Israel, but has called for a halt to Israel's ground and air assault on Gaza that Palestinian authorities say has killed more than 41,000 people and flattened whole cities, which also is not to mention the amount of people that have died from indirect killings. That's just the people that they shot in the head.
300,000 deaths is the low estimate for direct and indirect deaths.
And we find that just to be acceptable.
I don't.
When I say us, I usually refer to US. That's usually what I mean.
Us, like U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is still us because, unfortunately,
I was born here. I didn't want to be born.
like literally, he was born dead. He just did not want to live. He was just like, oh, fuck this. Who's the president? Oh, fuck this. Wasn't it Clinton? Wait. I don't know how long ago.
Reagan.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Swirled
I'm in the wrong timeline, guys.
There it is. We're just in the wrong time. The truth is that at the moment, there's a continuous, very strong reaction on the part of Israel. A strong reaction is coming out and like saying something, not fucking flattening and destroying an entire...
Proportionality. Strong reaction is a very, very
It's not-
understatement.
Yeah.
Underwhelming.
Yeah, it just doesn't even...
Have you been even watching the...
Yeah. Strong reaction.
Strong reaction. You mean a genocide and starting multiple wars. Okay. That's a strong reaction.
I'd like to have a strong reaction against Netanyahu.
Just let me in the ring with him one round.
Mm.
I would just eat his face.
Yeah, that was my first thought.
That's what I would do.
He doesn't need it. He's two-faced anyway. There's probably another one under there.
That's just my next go-to now. If I'm in a fight, I'm just gonna eat someone's face.
I'm just imagining you biting his nose like in a cage type arena.
You want your nose back? It's in my stomach. I'm gonna shit it out.
I would spit it out. That meat's got to be tainted. It's evil.
It's kosher.
Just sometimes reading some of this just makes me feel sick because I know I'm saying stuff that like I don't agree with, but I know we're reading the article as is, So it is that information. It's just sometimes like just say it's a strong reaction makes me feel like
I'm about to have a strong reaction.
like Jesus.
All right.
Yeah, I keep saying Jesus too, so that's even more perfect, isn't it?
That's triggering. Don't say that.
But like it is really my point of view. Like it is just barbaric at this point. It's medieval. It doesn't make sense. It feels like it's for the ignorant.
Yeah, it's like the Dark Age shit, dude. Like, I thought this stuff ended with Hitler. Like, on a mass scale for, like, months and years end, like, atrocities happen. But they're usually...
Take time.
No, not even that. Like, nowadays, in the modern era, tragedies happen, and then, like, they stop. People are like, hey, don't do that. Or, like, the UN's like, what the fuck? And they stop. Except in the case of Israel, we just let them do what the fuck they want. It's
The US
crazy.
is just like, here, have some more money, bro.
Yeah, have more money to bomb grannies and children.
I can't remember who said it. I think it was Trump who said they just need to get it done and over with. And that is why they're not allowed to have Al Jazeera running for the next 45 days, because that's exactly what he's about to do to the Middle East.
It's like we get a lot of comments that are like, Israel doesn't carpet bomb anybody. And I just want to be like,
I could literally send you like a gajillion videos and articles that proves that.
or like the diehard resistance liberals are like, we only send Israel defensive arms.
Defensive weapons are shields, motherfucker.
Yeah.
If you want to send them a bunch of shields, I'm down for that. Send them as many shields as you want. No, I mean like police shields. They want
Police
those?
shield.
Fine.
You have riot gear.
Yeah,
That's all you get.
that's defensive.
Yeah.
You can have a fucking baton, bitch.
You're occupying people in your... Yeah, I just continue. I'm sorry.
It's, this is why we have a hard time with it sometimes, because it's so irrational, illogical, and idiotic and disgusting, and it doesn't make sense. And us being simps doesn't make sense to me.
There are puppet client state. A rogue, out of control puppet client state.
Oh, what do you do with a rogue? What do you do with a rogue alliance?
You put them down. If you don't do what we say, you put them down. But Biden's such a fucking pushover; he doesn't know where the fuck he is, and Kamala doesn't say shit. So
Except
we
that
just let Israel do whatever the fuck they want, even though Netanyahu actually wants Trump. Even though Biden and Kamala let him do whatever the fuck he wants, doesn't make any goddamn sense. But okay.
I think he wants Trump because like Trump will push forward with like banning TikTok and stuff like that.
Trump will just do whatever the fuck he wants at this point. And, like Biden, stopped one fucking shipment and made a red line on Rafah. What none of it held. They destroyed Rafah, and now they're destroying southern Lebanon. Like Biden is fucking half asleep. He's gone, and Kamala's not saying the fucking thing, and she's the goddamn president, like presidential elect. Like she's.
Oh yeah,
She's not presidential elect. She's a fucking nominee.
And currently sitting vice president.
And not making any distinction between herself and Biden and Gaza policy, which is fucking stupid. Because you're losing so many Muslims. You're losing so many fucking uncommitted people.
I mean,
you don't give a fuck if you win Michigan, do you?
I think she made it pretty clear when she said that Israel has a right to defend itself. I think she made her stance pretty fucking clear.
And she keeps touting the Hamas raped women and like beheaded babies and shit.
Maybe she just needs to look up a video called "He Still Has His Nappy On." He still had his nappy on. Search TikTok. You'll see what I'm talking about.
AIPAC has given her $6 million. That's why she won't say a goddamn word. Money. Money rules us.
It's capitalism.
In every facet, in every way, we worship the dollar.
And we have to all sit here and just suck it up and deal with it and pretend like, yay, USA, we're number one.
It's when we privatize every damn thing. When we privatized part of Medicare, what happened? It got worse. We privatize part of anything, it gets fucking worse because of the profit motive.
Mm-hmm.
It's archaic at this point. Having the profit motive in life, in your death, at birth, those are things out of bounds. We demand that they're out of bounds.
Our generation and the generation after us is just like, bro, the fuck are y'all doing? You guys fucked this up and then gave it to us, and what are we supposed to do with this shit? Like,
we'll see. We'll probably turn into a bunch of fucking sellouts. A class of sellouts and a class of working people, like every other fucking generation. Knowing it, we just are more aware of it. Us and Zoomers are more aware of it. That's it. That's all that's gonna happen. It's the same shit. It's just we're actually gonna know.
the truth is that at the moment, there's a continuous, very strong reaction on the part of Israel, he said, after a meeting with European Union and Arab foreign ministers. George said it was crucial that Arabs and Europeans pursue joint rather than disparate initiatives that could weigh on Israel, but that the escalation at the Israel-Lebanon border of the last few days showed a collective international failure. We have not prevented the spillover, and the more dispersed the war becomes, the more the situation becomes more complicated to be solved, he said. Lebanon could easily be a zone of tremendous hostility, and this is something that we cannot deal with. It's a clear minefield. Since June, Greece has been seeking to convince member states in Europe to join a project to temporarily bring children hurt and traumatized by war in Gaza to the European Union. He said those talks, along with logistical coordination with Palestinians and Israelis, were ongoing, and he hoped they would bear fruit soon. He said Greece could take in some 500 children for its part.
That's not enough.
This is from Al Jazeera. Lebanon sees deadliest day since civil war as Israeli attacks kill 492 civilians. Israeli warnings and airstrikes on Lebanon raises fears of regional escalation into full-scale war.
Israeli air raids hitting mostly southern and eastern Lebanon have killed at least 492 people and wounded at least 1,700, according to the country's health ministry, in the deadliest day of conflict in Lebanon since its 1975 to 1990 civil war. The ministry said the death toll on Monday included at least 35 children, 58 women, and 2 medics as the bombardments hit homes, medical centers, ambulances, and cars of people trying to flee. Tens of thousands of Lebanese fled to the south, and the main highway out of the southern port city of Sidon was jammed with cars heading towards Beirut in the biggest exodus since the 2006 fighting. The government ordered schools and universities to close across most of the country and began preparing shelters for people displaced from the south. Some attacks hit residential areas of towns in the south of the Bekaa Valley in the east. One strike hit a wooded area as far away as Olibos in central Lebanon, more than 80 miles from the border and north of Beirut. The Israeli military also said it conducted a target strike in Beirut without offering immediate details. Israeli media reported that the target of the strike was senior military commander Ali Kariki, the head of the Southern Front, but Hezbollah said he is in good health and in a safe location. The Israeli army said it has struck more than 1,300 sites used by the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah. The increased hostilities raise further fears of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah, or even a wider regional conflict. Israel's military warned people in Lebanon to move away from places used by Hezbollah, which launched a barrage of rockets into northern Israel on Sunday. The warnings ignored the possibility that some residents could live in or near targeted structures without knowing they are at risk. They are at risk. Many people who received warnings told Al Jazeera that they did not know where to go.
I'll tell you right now, wherever Israel tells you to go, don't go there.
Yeah.
Don't go where they tell you to go. It's a fucking trap.
They also wondered how they were supposed to know where Hezbollah has stored its weapons, Al Jazeera's Jabari said, reporting for Beirut. They don't share this information readily, so it's created a lot of confusion and a lot of anger. Jabari said people in Beirut are anxious about not only what is happening in the south, but about how close they are to actually being in a full-out war between Hezbollah and Israel. On Monday evening, the Israeli government announced a nationwide state of emergency until September 30th. The Israeli media outlet Haaretz said that under the declaration, the army is granted powers to issue instructions to the Israeli public, allowing it to ban gatherings, limit studies, and issue additional instructions required to save lives. The intensification of the fighting across the shared border, which has seen low-level skirmishes since Israel launched its war on Gaza in October, follows last week's explosions of pagers and walkie-talkies, which killed dozens of people in Lebanon. Early on Monday, Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari said its forces conducted extensive strikes against Hezbollah posts after identifying attempts to fire rockets. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Monday after the strikes that Israel faced complicated days and called on Israelis to stay united as the campaign unfolded. I promised that we would change the security balance, the balance of power in the north. That is exactly what we are doing, he said in a message issued after a situational assessment at military headquarters in Tel Aviv. His government recently declared that it was shifting more focus to the fighting with Hezbollah in a bid to allow about 60,000 Israelis who evacuated from the border areas to return home. Asked by a reporter whether the army was planning a ground invasion into Lebanon, Hagari said, "We will do everything necessary to return the residents of the north to their homes safely." Lebanese media reported that people across the country, including Beirut in central Lebanon, have been receiving Israeli phone warnings telling them to evacuate. Lebanon's national news agency reported that citizens in Beirut and a number of areas are receiving landline telephone warning messages whose source is the Israeli enemy, asking them to quickly evacuate. Information Minister Zayed Makari's office in Beirut said it received a landline call featuring a recorded message that told it to evacuate the building to avoid an airstrike. The NNA labeled the phone warnings part of the psychological war that the enemy has adopted.
De-escalation to escalation.
Just say you have a small PP and get it over with.
The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed concern on Monday over the escalating tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, urging for de-escalation and a diplomatic solution. The Secretary General is indeed alarmed by the escalating situation along the Blue Line. He's very concerned about the large number of civilian casualties being reported by the Lebanese authorities, as well as the thousands of displaced persons amid the most intense exchange of fire across the Blue Line since October of last year. UN spokesperson Stephanie told reporters during a news conference. White House spokesperson John Kirby said the United States still believes there is room for a diplomatic solution while warning Israel there are better ways to allow its residents to return to their homes in the north. Hezbollah Deputy Chief Naim Qassam told mourners at the funeral of one of the group's commanders killed last week in Beirut, "We have entered a new phase, the title of which is the open-ended Battle of Reckoning." On Saturday, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets at Israel's Ramat David Air Base east of Haifa in its farthest-reaching attack inside Israel.
Oh, what? Wait, they're hitting like actual military bases instead of civilian homes? Huh.
Yeah.
Weird. Didn't know you could do that.
Monday's salvo was among the heaviest cross-border fire exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah since the start of the war in Gaza. The two parties have been exchanging nearly daily fire since October 8th, and the Iran-backed group says it would stop only once a ceasefire is achieved in the Palestinian enclave.
Oh, it sounds like Israel's the problem.
Stop the genocide, stop the war.
Huh. Easy logic. Oh my god, I thought it was more complicated than that. Look at that. We just fucking solved it.
But while those exchanges were largely confined to border areas and were aimed at primarily military targets, they have escalated dramatically this week. Israel's shift to focus was initiated in a wave of unprecedented attacks. On Tuesday and Wednesday, thousands of pagers and walkie-talkies exploded in Beirut, targeting Hezbollah's rank-and-file members as civilians and sending shockwaves across the country. As well as civilians and sending shockwaves across the country. At least 37 people were killed, and more than 3,000 were wounded in the explosions. These were widely blamed on Israel, which has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility. On Friday, an Israeli strike killed a senior commander of Hezbollah's elite Radwan unit and second-in-command of the group's armed forces. The strike in Beirut suburb of Da'iya killed at least 45 people, including 10 civilians. This is from USA Today. U.S. to send more troops to Middle East after Israeli targets Hezbollah in major Lebanon strike.
Gross. Gross. The Pentagon announced Monday that it is bolstering its forces in the Middle East as tensions between Israel and Hezbollah spike. The move, with an undisclosed number of troops, follows Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon on Hezbollah targets that killed at least 274 people and wounded more than 1,000, according to Lebanon's health ministry, and increasing rocket and missile fire on Israel. In light of increased tensions in the Middle East and out of an abundance of caution, we're sending a small number of additional U.S. military personnel forward to augment forces already in the region, said Air Force Major General Pat Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary. For operations security reasons, we won't comment on or provide specific details. There are about 40,000 U.S. troops in the region. The Pentagon has maintained a robust presence there since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, hoping to contain the fighting there. The new deployment was characterized as an insurance policy by a U.S. official who was not authorized to speak publicly. Given the increased tension in the region, the move is is prudent but does not indicate U.S. troops were needed for imminent combat, the official said.
Boots on the ground. Not good. That's Biden. That's Kamala. That's Kamala's policy too, because I don't see her speaking up about it. This is from USA Today. John Fetterman gleeful over pager and walkie-talkie attacks on Hezbollah. I love it.
Wow. What is wrong with us?
Fetterman is an Israeli simp. APAC bootlicker.
I mean, like, what's wrong with us, like, as humanity to where this is, like, happening?
APAC dick polisher.
You couldn't pay me enough money to support a genocide of a group of children, and you just couldn't.
Bunch of fucking pussies. Free Palestine.
Senator John Fetterman said he more than supports a suspected Israeli attack that exploded pagers and walkie-talkies across Lebanon last week, killing dozens and wounding thousands. He loves it. I thought what Israel chose to do about blowing up the pagers and then walkie-talkies, and then after targeting and eliminating membership and leadership of Hezbollah, I absolutely support that. In fact, if anything, I love it. Fetterman, Democrat in Pennsylvania, said on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday. Fetterman's comments came after Senator Bernie Sanders accused Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu of sabotaging ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas. He always does. Every time a deal appears close, Netanyahu moves the goalpost, introducing new demands and torpedoing the deal, Sanders said on the Senate floor in a video clip played for Fetterman. It is clear to me that Netanyahu is prolonging the war in order to cling to power. Fetterman said he completely disagreed with Sanders in the pager attack. Israel demonstrated that they will not allow terrorists not to be held accountable, and I fully support that, he added. 2 children were among those killed by the sabotage devices. I mean, clearly they were terrorists.
Israel was being the terrorist at that point.
I think whenever you, like, I don't know, send out devices to explode, I feel like that's an act of terrorism. It doesn't matter how you spell it.
The Lebanese people are afraid to use their household appliances. So it's called terrorism.
Yeah, that's an actual... How can you sit there and say that you absolutely love that somebody killed a bunch of people and hurt a bunch of people? Like, what is wrong with you?
Someone's daughter's head exploded.
They were standing right next to him, but I guess
and John
they deserved
Fetterman
it.
fucking loves it when little girls' heads explode.
Fetterman has expressed unflinching support for Israel since the escalation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict last October. His position has drawn the ire of left-leaning Democrats who have accused him of taking a sharp right turn from his messaging as a down-to-earth progressive in the lead-up to the Pennsylvania election victory. In response, Fetterman disavowed his label as a progressive. He traveled to Israel several months ago and met with Netanyahu, among with other Israeli leaders.
And he coddled
sucked
that
him
ball
off.
sack. He fucking coddled that ball sack. Happy.
He's like, man, I let him jizz in my face.
Oh my god.
This is from Mondoweiss. First, rainfall spells disaster for displaced Gaza families as winter approaches. As winter approaches, displaced families across Gaza are faced with 2 choices. Either sink in overflowing sewage in destroyed cities, or get flooded by rising tides on Gaza's beach encampments.
Only a few feet away from the water, thousands of tents are sprawled across Gaza's sandy beaches. Displaced families are trying to build sand barriers to prevent the incoming tide from flooding their living quarters. The ebb and flow of the tide has already cost several families their tents, who are now trying to pack up and find drier land. These were scenes that were taking place in Gaza last week, as Palestinians in the Strip experienced the first rainfall of the season. Last week's rain revealed the environmental and health disaster looming over the millions of displaced persons crowded in densely packed tent encampments or bombed out neighborhoods towards the center and north of Gaza, where hardly any infrastructure is left. Throughout its ongoing genocidal war, the Israeli army has destroyed 655,000 meters of sewage lines and 330,000 meters of water lines, according to Gaza's governmental media office. This means displaced families across Gaza will be faced with 2 choices during the incoming winter season, during which floods have become increasingly common: either sink in sewage water in Gaza's decimated urban landscape, or get swallowed up by the rising tide in the tent encampments by the sea. Ataya Abu Banan, 28, is a father to a 1-year-old daughter and lives in an encampment on the beach near Khan Yunis. His family's tent was flooded after rainstorms passed through Gaza last week, causing the tide to rise. He spent the entire night on September 15th standing in inches of seawater, his feet soaking wet while holding his daughter up to protect her from the water. The waves had damaged part of his tent and soaked his family's belongings, including their clothes and food. Like they already have. Like they have so much to lose in the first place.
I know, to lose what you have left must be devastating.
To have to stand all night holding your child, just trying to make sure that they won't get sick at the risk of knowing that you could.
Just to have them bomb the next day? Yeah, it's pretty fucking bleak.
In video testimony for Mondowise, Atea stands on the beach on a cloudy day and waits for his clothes to dry as he wears them. He tells Mondowise that his family doesn't have anywhere left to go. He and countless other families like his own arrived at the beach 2 months ago. Most of the people in Deir al-Balah had come in from the Khan Yunis and Rafah, the latest in a series of displacements since the start of the war nearly a year ago. I lost everything I have last night, he tells Mondowise. All I have are the clothes I'm wearing. In another video interview for Mondowise, Ilham Abu Amsha, a mother of 8, stands on the beach as thousands of tents stretch out in the background behind her. She says that during the previous night, the tide flooded her tent and dragged her children several meters away from her while they were sleeping. It was a very difficult night, she says. The waves were high and scary, and they flooded everybody's tents, and the winds were so very strong and violent, causing tearing in the tent's fabric. This is an unbearable situation, Ilham adds. Our safe shelters are dangerous. It's unbearable. Ilham describes how her children were almost dragged out to sea by the force of the waves. If we hadn't caught them, they would be dead by now, she says. Where else should we take our children? Look at the waves. Do we stay here until they swallow us? Ilham is also concerned that with the coming winter, they will be caught between the sea and the cold. Will we die from the cold or the sea or the bombings? She asks incredulously. If winter comes and we're still here, we won't have a blanket to warm ourselves. We won't even have a piece of tarp to shield us from the rain. Displaced Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are no longer just receiving evacuation warnings from the Israeli army. Yeah, they shifted that to Lebanon. Municipalities now also send out warnings to displaced people in areas where rainwater or sewage has flooded the streets, directing them to move to other locations so they can bomb them. Hazem Fahid, an engineer at the Deir al-Balah municipality, says that the Sahin al-Baraka area housing thousands of displaced families had received an evacuation order from the municipality. Most of the rainwater flows into this part of Deir al-Balah now, but he tells Mondowise. And there is no drainage system to remove the water. This is the danger. If rain falls in large quantities, people will be in significant danger and their lives will be at risk. But he stresses that in some areas, people might actually be at risk of drowning from the expected severity of the floods. In the Sahin al-Baraka area, the water's levels can reach up to 2.5 meters. People will drown. Fahid adds that the Deir al-Balah municipality has not faced problems from the accumulation of rainwater in these areas before, but due to Israel's destruction of the city's roads and infrastructure, this year is different, he says. A tragedy could occur. Palestine has an outbreak of polio. It's the first time they had any kind of issues of polio in 25 years.
Which is a waterborne illness.
And they allowed vaccinations in, but they wouldn't let the syringes in, so they were just giving the vaccination orally in hopes that
it works.
Yep. It's disgusting. Like, how do you do this to people?
You dehumanize them.
You can't. They're humans.
Yep.
And haven't we worked towards a world where we can have like disagreeing points of views without a massacre happening? Sahin al-Baraka is a wide 300 dunam area, about 30 hectares, one of the few areas large enough to accommodate the number of displaced people. When they first arrived in the area 2 months prior, it was still summer and there was no risk of flooding. Gaza's government media office issued a report on September 14th stating that the number of displaced people in Gaza has continued to increase over recent months, documenting the existence of 543 shelters and displaced centers across the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is on the edge of a real humanitarian disaster with the coming of winter. It's already a humanitarian disaster. The Gaza Strip is on the edge of a real humanitarian disaster with the coming of winter, the media office said. Almost 2 million people will be homeless as a direct result. The displaced will sleep on the ground and remain exposed to the elements. The reporter also stated that the government's field assessment indicates that over 100,000 tents in Gaza are unfit for human habitation as a result of wear and tear, clarifying that most of the tents are made of plastic and fraying fabrics. The government media office's report also issued a humanitarian distress call to the world, calling on the international community to save the 2 million displaced people of Gaza before it's too late. And you know what the United States says to that?
We're gonna send Israel more weapons. We're gonna send them more money. Yay, that's our response.
This is from Al Jazeera. Israel closes Al Jazeera bureau in Ramallah. All you need to know, at 3 a.m., heavily armed Israeli soldiers raided the office of Al Jazeera in Ramallah, throwing the team out. It's insane.
On live television, heavily armed Israeli soldiers raided Al Jazeera's occupied West Bank bureau in Ramallah and handed the bureau head, Walid al-Amari, a notice to shut it down. The soldiers ordered everyone working the overnight shift at the bureau to leave, telling them that they could only take their personal belongings. The order came from the Israeli Military Authority, despite the bureau being in Area A, an area delineated as being under Palestinian control in the Oslo Accords. Wait, so if Ramallah is under Palestinian control, how can Israel do this? This is not the first time Israel has undertaken actions in the Oslo Accord-defined Area A, where Ramallah is and where the Palestinian Authority has its seat. 1 year ago, UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Wensland, reported that just between June and September last year, there had been many Palestinian casualties caused by Israeli operations in Area A. The other two areas in the occupied West Bank are Area B, which the PA also administers on paper, sharing security control with Israel. Area C is under complete Israeli control. Regardless of legal jurisdiction, Israel has acted with impunity across the occupied West Bank. Why did Israel raid the bureau? Israel has often targeted Al Jazeera and its journalists, at times going as far as killing them, as it did Shireen Abu Akleh, Samir Boudica, Ismail al-Gaul, and Rami al-Rafi. This is very much in line with the policy of the State of Israel since 1948. To prevent real news about Palestinians or about what the State of Israel is doing to Palestinians, colonizing them and arresting them and torturing them, Rami Karuri, distinguished fellow at the American University in Beirut, told Al Jazeera. Well, why did Israel do this?
They need 45 days to carry out their genocide.
The closure order accuses Al Jazeera of incitement and supporting terrorism. Karuri said Al Jazeera is the primary instrument for informing the world about Israel's violations in Palestinian territory. What did Israel do to the bureau? The entire team working in the bureau overnight was told to leave. Initially, they were told on camera that they should leave with their personal belongings and cameras. However, they had to leave the cameras in the office in the end. Al Jazeera's Jafar Badiri, who had been working when the raid happened, told Al Jazeera Arabic that the Israeli group that raided the office had included engineers, which made her fear that the raiders had also come to destroy the bureau's archives. The soldiers were in the offices for a few hours, during which time the only thing that could be observed was some of them tearing down a large banner of slain Al Jazeera Arabic journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Is the Al Jazeera team okay? Nobody on the team has been injured. They spent hours standing on the street at a distance from their office building, unable to approach it or retrieve their cars. They were also, according to Al Jazeera Arabic's Budiri, unable to move to cover the raid, as any member of the group who moved was threatened with Israeli weapons laser. As the Israeli soldiers were in the Al Jazeera bureau, destroying things like the banner of Shireen Abu Akleh, more soldiers in armored cars patrolled the area around the building, and the bureau team could hear gunfire and firing of tear gas canisters all around. When can the bureau reopen? The order is for 45 days. However, bureau head al-Amari said he assumes it will be renewed automatically as as has been the case in early May civilian order Israel issued to close the Al Jazeera Bureau in Israel. Al Jazeera's bureau in Israel was closed in May after the Israeli parliament passed what became known as the Al Jazeera Law, which allowed the government to shut down for 45 days at a time any foreign media that posed a threat to the state. With this jurisdiction, a large number of inspectors from the Ministry of Communications arrived at the Al Jazeera offices and confiscated equipment on May 5th. The temporary shutdown has been renewed since then and still holds. The Ramallah closure comes from an authority that does not, in theory, have any power over Ramallah. This is from the BDS movement. BDS condemns U.S. Democratic Party's shameless complicity in Israel's apartheid and genocide against Palestinians. The BDS movement calls for the international prosecution of leaders of the United States, including heads of the Democratic Party, and condemns the party's repressive, anti-Palestinian demonization of BDS.
The Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions (BDS) movement calls for the international prosecution of leaders of the United States, including heads of the Democratic Party, for their unparalleled complicity in Israel's genocide, not to mention in its 76 years of settler colonialism and apartheid against the indigenous Palestinian people. The U.S. government, whether run by Democrats or Republicans, has consistently funded and provided political cover to Israel's regime of oppression since it was established through the planned genocidal destruction of Palestinian society in 1948, the Nakba. By 2022, the U.S. had given to Israel a sum exceeding $300 billion. The BDS movement also condemns the Democratic Party's repressive, anti-Palestinian demonization of BDS. This repression aims at silencing authoritative and representative Palestinian voices and undermining the Palestine solidarity movement that is exponentially growing in the U.S., particularly among the younger generations, including the Jewish community. Led by the Biden-Harris administration, the Democratic Party establishment enthusiastically supports the continued arming of Israel, shielding it from accountability while it continues its live-streamed genocide of 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied and besieged Gaza Strip. Leaders in both major parties in the U.S., which has fundamentally anti-democratic, oligarchic, and exponentially corrupt election system, are bought and paid for by various lobby groups, including the weapons lobby and the Israel lobby, as admitted today by mainstream figures in the U.S. media and academia. The Democratic Party has systematically resisted meaningful justice and reparations for indigenous nations and Black Americans following centuries of colonialism and enslavement. True to this infamous history, the Democratic National Convention is now reaffirming the party's support for Israel's Gaza genocide, insisting on unconditionally arming Israel and attacking in its platform the BDS movement, which is led by the largest coalition in Palestinian society. In short, it is bowing to special interest pressure from Israel's influential lobby and to its bribes, otherwise presented as donations. That's why donations should only come from the people and not third-party lobbying groups. Maybe we actually have something good happen. The Democrats have partnered with the far-right Republicans in Congress and in dozens of state legislators in eroding freedom of speech to unprecedented levels with their representative McCarthyite unconstitutional attacks on BDS, which present a serious threat also to racial, economic, social, gender, and climate justice movements. As leading civil rights groups have affirmed, boycotting is a time-honored, non-violent form of political, economic, or social protest that is rooted in the U.S. civil rights movement, protected by the U.S. Constitution, and upheld as such by the U.S. Supreme Court. We demand international accountability for the crimes against humanity perpetrated by the U.S. government, including Democratic Party leaders in Palestine and across the global South, and for the constitutional and internationally stipulated right to freedom of expression to be upheld. We salute the millions of Americans who have been marching against Israel's genocide, protesting, and peacefully disrupting the partnership of the Biden-Harris administration in it, and escalating boycott and divestment pressures on complicit corporations and institutions, including universities. So this is an article that I have read from MondoWise that states that 2 U.S. government agencies have now confirmed that Israel blocked humanitarian aid to Gaza. And Blinken is ignoring their findings because if it is proven that they are blocking humanitarian aid, then the U.S. by law would have to stop arming Israel. So even though the two different places did verify this already, that they did in fact block humanitarian aid as verified by the U.S. Aid and State Department Refugee Bureau. So the Biden-Harris admits that they're complicit in the war crimes because they get that evidence put in front of them, and then they get Netanyahu telling them that, nah, it's not happening. It's not really happening. And they're just like, oh, he said it's not happening, so that's just the way we're going to take it. So
It's like, what, at one point, there's enough flour on the other side of the border to feed 1.5 million Palestinians.
just mere 30 miles away from them.
Yeah, 30 miles away from them.
But the Israeli government's blocked its transferred as of starting in February, claiming it was designated for the UN's Palestinian branch, which they accused of having ties to.
Hamas.
And therefore they think that they were right, and to block the humanitarian aid, and us, who wants to continue to fund a genocide, decided we'll take his word for it. That goes along with like the not wanting to fucking believe in facts.
This is a 10-year-old Palestinian girl.
Just to put things into perspective.
What do you expect me to do? Fix it? I'm only 10. I can't even do anything anymore. I just want to be a doctor or anything to help my people. I can't. I'm just a kid. I don't even know what to do. I get scared, but not really that much. I do anything for my people, but I don't know what to do. I'm just 10. I'm just 10. All of this, when I see it, I literally cry every day, saying to myself, why do we deserve this? What did we do to this? My family said they just hate us. They just don't like us because we are Muslims. Why does Muslim act for you like that? You see all of the kids around me? They're just kids. Why wouldn't you just send a missile to them and kill them? It's not fair. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
This is from the BBC. Volunteers dying as Russia's war dead tops 70,000.
More than 70,000 people fighting in Russia's military have now died in Ukraine, according to data analyzed by the BBC. And for the first time, volunteers, civilians who joined the armed forces after the start of the war, now make up the highest number of people killed in the battlefield since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. Every day, the names of those killed in Ukraine, their obituaries, and photographs from their funerals are published across Russia in the media and on social networks. BBC Russian and the independent website Mediazona have collated these names, along with names from other open sources, including official reports. We checked that the information had been shared by authorities or relatives of the deceased, and that they had been identified as dying in the war. New graves in cemeteries has also helped provide the names of the soldiers killed in Ukraine. These are usually marked by flags and wreaths sent by the Defense Ministry. We have identified the names of 70,112 Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine, but the actual number is believed to be considerably higher. Some families do not share details of their relatives' deaths publicly, and our analysis does not include names we were unable to check, or the deaths of militia in Russian-occupied Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. Among them, 14,000 were volunteers, about 20%, and fatalities among volunteers now exceed other categories. Former prisoners who joined up in return for pardons for their crimes were previously the highest, but now they account for 19% of all confirmed deaths. Mobilized soldiers, citizens called up to fight, account for 13%. Since October last year, weekly fatalities of volunteers have not dipped below 100, and in some weeks we have recorded more than 310 volunteer deaths. As for Ukraine, it rarely comments on the scale of its deaths on the battlefield. In February, its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, said 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed, but estimates based on U.S. intelligence suggest greater losses. The story of Renat Kushyanov is typical of many of the volunteer soldiers who died. He is from Ufa in Uzbekistan and had been working 2 jobs to make his ends meet, at a tram depot and a plywood factory, He was 62 years old when he signed his contract with the Russian army in November last year. He survived less than 3 months of fighting and was killed on the 27th of February. His obituary and a local online memorial website simply called him a hard-working, decent man. According to the data we analyzed, most of the men signing up come from small towns and parts of Russia where stable, well-paid work is hard to find. Most appear to have joined up willingly, although some in the Republic of Chechnya had told human rights activists and lawyers of coercion and threats. Some of the volunteers have said that they did not understand the contracts they were signing and had no end date, and have since approached pro-Kremlin journalists to unsuccessfully ask them for helping to end their service.
Yeah, Russia did send some stuff out to different countries, like enticing them to come there. Just like saying all this good stuff, like we'll give you a house, we'll give you a job, we'll get you all set up.
$2,000.
But once you get over there, what you find is that you get dropped in the middle of a battlefield you didn't even sign up to join, to your knowledge. So a lot of people are being coerced into joining the Russian military while not ever intending to join the Russian military. So, yeah.
Not so great. Salaries in the military can be 5 to 7 times higher than average wages in less affluent parts of the country. Plus, soldiers get social benefits, including free childcare and tax breaks. One-off payments for people who sign up have also repeatedly risen in value in many parts of Russia. Most of the volunteers dying at the front are aged between 42 and 50. They number 4,100 men in our list of more than 13,000 volunteers. The oldest volunteer killed was 71 years old. A total of 250 volunteers above the age of 60 have died in the war.
That's too old, dude.
Soldiers have told the BBC that rising casualties among volunteers are in part down to their deployment to the most operationally challenging areas of the front line, notably in the Donetsk region of the east, where they form the backbone of reinforcements for depleted units, Russian soldiers told the BBC. Russia's meat grinder strategy continues unabated, according to Russian soldiers we have spoken to. The term has been used to describe the way Moscow sends waves of soldiers forward relentlessly to try to wear down Ukrainian forces and expose their locations to Russian artillery. Drone footage shared online shows Russian forces attacking Ukrainian positions with little or no equipment or support from artillery or military vehicles. Sometimes, hundreds of men have been killed on a single day. In recent weeks, the Russian military have made desperate but unsuccessful attempts to seize the eastern Ukrainian towns of Cheshev Yar and Pokrovsk with such tactics. An official study by the primary military medical directorate of the Russian Defense Ministry says that 39% of soldiers' deaths are a result of limb injuries and that mortality rates would be significantly improved if first aid and subsequent medical care were better. The Russian government's actions suggest it is keen to avoid forcing people to fight through a new official wave of mobilization. Instead, it is ramping up calls for service volunteers, along with the incentives to do so. Remarks by the regional officials in local parliaments suggest that they have been tasked from the top with trying to recruit people from their local districts. They advertise on job vacancy websites, contact men who have debt and bailiff problems, and conduct recruitment campaigns in higher education establishments. Since 2022, convicted prisoners have also been encouraged to join up in return for their release. But now a new policy means people facing criminal prosecution can accept a deal to go to war instead of facing trial in court. In return, their cases are frozen and potentially dropped altogether. A small number of the volunteers killed have been from other countries. We have identified the names of 272 such men, many of whom were from Central Asia, 47 from Uzbekistan, 51 from Tajikistan, and 26 from Kyrgyzstan. Last year saw reports of Russia recruiting people in Cuba, Iraq, Yemen, and Serbia. Foreigners already living in Russia without valid work permits or visa who agree to work for the state are promised they will not be deported and offered a simplified route to citizenship if they survive the war. Many have later complained that if they did not understand the paperwork, as with Russian citizens, they would have turned to the media for help. The governments of India and Nepal have called on Moscow to stop sending their citizens to Ukraine and repatriate the bodies of the dead. So far, the calls have not been acted upon. Many new recruits who have joined the military have criticized the training they have received. A man who signed a contract with a Russian army in November last year told the BBC he had been promised 2 weeks of training at a shooting range before being deployment to the front. In reality, people were just thrown out into the parade ground and dished out with some gear, he said, adding the equipment was poorly made.
That's because you're meant to be you're just meant to be fodder.
Yeah.
You are human shields. You're just human shields.
Not real ones, but yeah.
You're not being like literally like held down and tied to a vehicle, but you're human shields in the sense that they're like, we don't think you're going to
We
survive.
prefer that you die than our Russian soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not right either.
Nope.
We were loaded onto trains, then trucks, and sent to the front. About half of us were thrown into battle straight from the road. As a result, some people went from the recruitment office to the front line in just a week, he said. Samuel Crenny Evans, an analyst at the Royal United Services Institute in the UK, says, basic understanding of things like camouflage and concealment of how to move quietly at night, how to move without creating a profile for yourself during the day, should be taught as basic infantry skills.
Yeah.
Another soldier who told the BBC that equipment is a problem, saying it varies, but most often it's some random set of uniforms, standard boots that wear out within a day, and a kit bag with a label showing it was made in the mid-20th century. A random bulletproof vest and a cheap helmet. It's impossible to fight in this. If you want to survive, you have to buy your own equipment. Well, I have a few thoughts on the Ukraine war since we haven't really covered it at all. But, so NATO a while ago was like, we aren't going to move eastward. And Russia was like, don't move eastward. And since then, we've pushed eastward. We've gained more nations in the UN, like farther east than they should have been. We've even been talking about Ukraine being a UN state. A lot of those Scandinavian countries became UN states, and that was against what NATO promised. I know that Ukraine, since 2014, after Crimea was taken, has been shelling the Donetsk and Luhansk areas that are mostly Russian-speaking areas. And I know Putin is an imperialist and
A war criminal.
and when what he's tried to do is not correct. His reasoning is not correct. It's Ukraine is ours anyway kind of approach.
You mean
It's just the same imperialist stance everyone else does. The Minsk, I don't know if there's the Minsk Accords or the Minsk Agreement, but it was basically no more eastward expansion from NATO, no more aggressive whatever, and Russia, no more imperialist shit. But they did imperialist shit, and NATO did move eastward. So on both sides, they fucked up. They went against what they were saying, and fucking make peace. Just come to an agreement. If Zelensky, if he wasn't he's so hooked on U.S. weapons and money, like a lot of that shit doesn't. We don't even know where the fuck a lot of that goes. Like, there's even a report like we don't even know where like a lot of that money goes, and like there's a bunch of fucking Nazis in Ukraine. There's a bunch of fucking Nazis in Russia, and like it's a fucking mess. And like Russia's made big gains. Ukraine's pushed them out. Russia comes back. They push them out. Then Ukraine takes some more. Fucking take the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine, like Donetsk and Luhansk, the place that Ukraine has been shelling since 2014. They're Russian. Crimea, I don't know. You kind of like have to like negotiate that out. Russia shouldn't have taken it. Whatever. So, yeah,
It almost seems,
it's more complicating than Israel Palestine because there's an obvious villain. In the Russian-Ukraine war, it's a little more nuanced.
I mean, there's two militaries. I mean, Ukraine has a military and Russia has a military, so they're two militant groups that are fighting each other. A genocide is a militant group versus citizens. It's just a genocide. So there is a big difference because even if they wanted to, the Palestinians do not have the weapons, the food, the strength, the health, the ability to accurately fight back. But Ukraine and Russia are two armies that are having a disagreement. And it almost seems like the United Nations should step in and fucking end all this shit and do something.
Instead, America's just like, we don't have to
get
listen
too
to
fussed about
our rules.
When Russia bombs civilian infrastructure, when they bomb a hospital, when they bomb a school, you fucking hear about it. Israel they bombed a Hamas militant operation. It just so happened to be a school or a hospital.
Shouldn't be a thing.
We're the world police. America, fuck yeah.
Except we're the worst police in the
We're
world.
the most corrupt motherfucking cops ever. This is from Mondoweiss. Jill Stein leads Kamala Harris among Muslim voters in swing states as Palestine supporters weigh choices amid Gaza genocide. A recent poll shows Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein beating Kamala Harris among Muslim voters in multiple swing states as pro-Palestinian voters weigh the upcoming U.S. presidential race.
Vote for Jill Stein.
Vote for Jill Stein.
Earlier this month, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, or ADC, held its annual convention in Dearborn, Michigan. Participants say that the first and loudest standing ovation of the event occurred after author and activist Susan Abuhala encouraged the crowd to vote for Green Party presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein. I'm asking you to have enough self-respect to not go and vote for the Democratic Party. She
Amen.
told the crowd. Yeah, for
Amen.
real. You don't have only two choices, guys. It's not just red or blue. There's other options. The reaction to Susan's comments shouldn't be surprising to anyone who has followed polling on the issue. An August report put out by the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, showed Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Stein essentially tied among Muslim voters, with 29.4% of American Muslims saying they plan to vote for the vice president, 29.1% saying that they would vote for Stein. The polling surveyed over 1,000 Muslims between August 25th and August 27th after Harris accepted her party's nomination. In September, CAIR published a follow-up report specifically looking at Muslim voters in important swing states. Those polls showed Stein leading Harris in Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Candidates running for office cannot afford to overlook the issues that matter most to Muslim Americans, said CAIR Government Affairs Director Robert McCaw. In a statement, ignoring this community or taking their votes for granted could be a costly mistake, particularly in swing states.
That's why they're suing all the Greens off of swing states.
How are you going to sue Jill Stein?
They just sue the party off of the swing states because they're so for democracy.
Yeah, I mean, so for democracy, I mean, we all agreed that Kamala Harris should be the Democratic nominee. We all decided.
We all
that.
decided that.
Yeah, we voted for it.
Yeah. Not at all.
No one asked us. Literally, no one asked us.
No one asked anyone. They're just like, it's her, I guess.
Yep. But just also remember, it's illegal in a lot of states to say anything bad about Israel. So just keep that in mind as well, because you have freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech, unless you want to
Tell the truth.
criticize Israel.
Well,
then you're anti-Semitic automatically.
I acknowledge that there are people that are in Israel that are too terrified to stand up to their government and may not agree
I would
with what's
be.
happening.
If I was Israeli, I would move. If I couldn't move, I'd keep my mouth shut because everyone in my fucking country is a crazy ass fascist.
And you want to keep your family safe, and you want to keep living, because if you do say something, you're just going to get a bullet to the head.
Yeah.
So
You could drone your fucking house. They don't give a fuck.
Mm-mm.
The IDF don't give a fuck.
yeah, they'll just put a grenade under their feet. I don't.
I'll put a boot in your ass.
That's really
the
what.
American world.
Except for a bunch of fucking pussies that aid and abetted in the genocide and aren't putting our boot in anyone's
Bunch of
ass.
fucking pussies that want to bomb children and grandmas. We're so big and strong.
That's why I'm saying, Israel, for real, Netanyahu, just, your penis is small. Frustration over Harris's Gaza policy certainly isn't limited to Muslim voters, as thousands of Americans have protested the genocide in recent months. A YouGov poll commissioned by AGP Action in May found that in key swing states, roughly 1 in 5 are less likely to vote for President Biden based on Gaza. Biden is no longer the candidate, but Harris has made it clear that she will continue his policies in the region. A recent report from the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU, found that a majority of Muslim voters identify Gaza as their top issue. We found that Gaza unites Muslim voters like no issue has before, regardless of age, race, gender, nativity, or candidate preferences. ISPU Senior Research Project Manager Uram Ikramullah told MondoWise, overall, 61% of Muslim voters named the war in Gaza as one of their top 3 policy priorities. We're with you there, bro. We have not seen Muslims and American coalesce around an issue since we began polling in 2016. In previous years, domestic issues like the economy and healthcare topped the list. I mean, it's not very complicated. There's an active genocide that we're actively paying for. Then, of course, your voters are going to be like, dude, stop killing babies. What are you doing?
Stop killing babies. Why is it so hard? Just not kill babies.
Because
It's like the easiest thing to do. Just don't kill babies.
because after Israel completes their mission, then we will assist them with cleaning up and establishing new parties, new homes and businesses that will also be, I'm sure there's a Trump Tower that's going to be there, some high-rise apartments,
It's going to take 15 years just to clear the rubble.
Not if you have as much humanitarian aid as they'll receive from the United States. We'll probably send a bunch of troops over to help them clear the whole fucking thing out. Not just us, the other countries.
Timeshare in Gaza, right by the sea.
Yeah, because that's what I want to do, is go somewhere where I will get killed. Woohoo!
Motherfuckers, stolen land.
We say that while we literally live on stolen land.
Yeah, that's true.
But you would think that the years that U.S. has been committing and acting and abating in genocide, they'd realize that that is something that unifies the people. Nobody wants to see a genocide. It doesn't matter how old you
The
are.
Democratic base doesn't want to see it.
And it's not a matter of do it behind our backs like you used to. It's a matter of just fucking stop doing it. Just stop.
Stop sending weapons. Stop sending money. Sanction Israel. Arrest Netanyahu.
Country. Any other country, we would do it. Any other country, we would send people in there to destabilize the whole fucking thing and assassinate.
Regime change time.
Yes.
They had the Muslim vote like in the bag until this shit happened. And it was like, no. What the fuck are you doing?
Well, why would they even care about Muslim votes? That's the whole thing.
Because they're going to lose Michigan. They're going to lose Wisconsin. They're going to lose key Midwest Rust Belt states.
But it's what brown people want. So, like...
It's the left's fault.
It's not the left's fault. It's the Democratic Party's fault. And they are not left. They're diet right. That's all they are. They're just one little... They're like, here's your right base where it, like, that starts. And they're just like, one tiny little hostile.
Dude, it's like the ratchet effect has happened for so long. It's just like, fuck, they can't go any further. It's like, we got to start pulling it back towards the left, obviously.
Yeah, now we need to give back Roe v. Wade and allow people to get the abortions, but not make it an actual federal policy.
Abortion's got to be in the show.
It's one of the big things, too. That's one of the other big like things that get people is the abortion policies. Because people want to know that they can safely go to a doctor if they have an ectopic pregnancy. Once they decide that they aren't able to have a baby, they aren't set up to have a baby, they make that decision. There's some health concerns. They want to know that they can go to a doctor and get help and not just sit there on the bed and die in front of everyone while they just stand around scratching their fucking ball sack saying, oh, we can't take it out. We can't help you. Not yet. It's an abortion if we help you. I don't get it. I know it's back on abortion, but like that one girl in Georgia that passed away who had a kid who now has left a child without a mother just because the doctors were too afraid to help her remove a dead fetus from her womb.
You know, ever since you're a young person as an American, it's drilled in your head that freedom is everything. And that freedom is why our nation exists. And then you realize, oh, I can't control what goes on inside of my body. I can't put things into my body that I want to put in my body.
I can't say the things or judge the people.
I can't criticize or say things that I want to say. We're not actually free at all. It's an illusion.
Because when it comes down to it, all they have to do is dingle $1 in front of you.
Yeah, you just privatize all of it. Put the carrot at the end of the stick, and the free market will provide. I'll tell you, as a lower class, poorer American, I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the
trickle down effect.
I feel a lot of violence and austerity, to be honest with you.
So anger and depression. I'm sad because like I really didn't think it could be so hard just to get so simple of help. Just so simple. It's just simple.
Basic shit.
I just need.
In America, it's hard just to get basic shit. Like you work just for your basic needs.
Who
the fuck wants to do that? Who the fuck wants to slave 40 hours a week just to have the things you need? That's the
in
the 50s and 60s. That wasn't the fucking case.
Oh, you could have like a house and multiple cars and only one person working. It's gone. They ruined it. They ruined the economy. They established the credit score, which was just a fucking another way to control us and beat us down and make sure that poor people can't ever get ahead.
You just want to fuck poor people.
Pretty much.
You want to exploit us for your wealth, and you throw us away as soon as you don't need us. Economic freedom? You call this economic freedom? This is economic anarchy. The rich just get to fuck us whatever the way they fucking like. That's America. Whoever you work for is your fucking tyrant, is your fucking daddy. And you better kiss or you starve. That's your fucking choice.
Because don't forget, you represent the company while you're not actively at the company working. So when you're out at a barbecue, when you're out fishing, when you're driving your car, you still represent the company that you work for. Ergo, if you make any decisions on your off time for yourself, they can make the right to fire you, including some businesses, which I work for, have also made it to where you cannot criticize Israel or you will get fired. How is that freedom? How is that freedom?
It's not.
I've been
We are
paying
still slaves.
for almost 3 months and I can't even just get some basic ass help. Just basic ass help. One hospital tells me there's nothing wrong with me. The next ER says you have a nodule on your lung. And then you try to make an appointment so you can find out what this is wrong with you, what's going on with your lungs. Both of your parents or grandparents had fucking lung cancer, but you know what? I get my appointment canceled. My test canceled. Where's my free? What am I supposed to fucking do, dude? I am actually literally at a bit of a loss at the moment with all that kind of stuff because I really just feel like I'm running in circles and just no one's
going to help us. They don't care.
So my choice is either
This is austerity.
keep pushing to find out what's wrong, or
It's
just go
fucking
back to
violence.
work and be in pain and possibly cause more damage. What?
It's fucking violence.
I don't want to give my life up for work.
The level of expertise in these doctors or in small towns is fucking violence on the working class. The fucking services and the shitty people and the fucking government and how they don't give a fuck is violence on the working class. The fucking economy, the fucking grocery prices, the fucking toilet paper prices is fucking violence on the working class. The gas prices, the oil prices, fucking violence!
Slave wages. Most people have to work multiple jobs, not just 40 hours, just to make ends meet. We found that 2 policies related to Gaza would earn votes of Muslims across the political spectrum. Support for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and support for reduction of military aid to Israel, she added. Our poll reveals that many voters who supported Biden in 2020 shifted their support away from him before he withdrew from the race due to a strong backing of Israel's military actions in Gaza. In fact, 89% of Muslim voters in swing states said a permanent ceasefire in Gaza would make them more likely to vote for a candidate. Since President Joe Biden dropped out of the race in July, there's been an ongoing discussion about whether a Harris presidency would differ from Biden's on Gaza. According to Harris herself, it would not. So, let me be very clear. I'm unequivocal in Israel's right to defend itself, and that's not going to change, Harris told CNN's Dana Bash in an August interview. When pressed on whether she might halt weapons shipment to Israel over its conduct in Gaza, she said no. During the presidential debate, Harris aggressively pushed back on GOP candidate Donald Trump's assertion that she hates Israel. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people, Harris assured viewers. The policy section of Harris's campaign website also makes it very clear that she will maintain Biden's policy. Vice President Harris will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to protect United States forces and interests from Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups, it reads. Vice President Harris will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and she will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself. She and President Biden are working to end the war in Gaza, such that Israel is secure, hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. She and President Biden are working around the clock to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And they've been saying that since February. What has happened? A continuation in the genocide and a continual funding of said genocide. They aren't trying to get a deal and a ceasefire deal done. In contrast to Harris, Stein has consistently condemned Israel's assault on Gaza and referred to it as a genocide. Stein's campaign website calls for an immediate ceasefire, an end to the blockade of Gaza, and an end to all military aid to Israel. It also calls for sanctions on the country and an end to a long-standing United States practice of vetoing UN Security Council resolutions targeting its human rights abuses. During the primaries, when Joe Biden was still the Democratic nominee, activists in Michigan called on voters to send the president a message by marking their ballots uncommitted. More than 500,000 people voted uncommitted, unexpectedly netting the campaign a number of delegates at this summer's Democratic National Convention. The uncommitted movement was able to hold a panel in Chicago during the DNC where they discussed their push for the arms embargo on Israel. However, the request to get a speaker on the convention floor was denied, a move that was widely criticized by many, including some Democratic lawmakers, giving her opportunities to earn votes.
To be better.
It's just annoying when you literally are telling somebody like how to get votes, and they're just like, "Now your vote doesn't matter."
Nah. I guess you don't care about the Muslim vote, obviously,
I don't
because
think she
you'd
does.
change something about what you're fucking doing if you cared. I guess you don't care about beating Trump that bad.
I would
Just let it
trust
fucking
Trump.
ride, dude. Let it fucking ride. See what happens. And then blame fucking leftists afterwards. Please. Please fucking, I will laugh to no fucking end.
The refusal by the Democrats and the Kamala Harris campaign to have a Palestine American speaker address the DNC was just the latest misstep by a party that, even when it recognizes its need for progress, Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian voters just can't bring itself to confront its own devaluation of Palestinian lives, especially in Gaza. The DNC rejection sparked further debate about whether Palestine activists should bother engaging with the Democratic Party at all. You shouldn't.
Fucking snakes, dude.
And they might, even if she does, at this point, even if she does attempt to backstep and say that she will do all these things, I believe it to be a politician promise.
Fucking coddling those Biden balls.
Collecting a fucking paycheck and not doing anything to help.
Coddling those Biden balls.
Oh, God, that makes me think of Big Daddy. You want those old, wrinkly
You want those
balls?
old, wrinkly balls? Damn.
What's his 5-year plan? Not to die?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
That really is Biden's 5-year plan.
5-year plan, Biden, not die. That's my plan too, though. That's sad.
That's Trump's plan too. Millennials and Gen Z just don't want any part of this shit anymore. They watch their parents slave away for corporations that cared
Their
less.
whole fucking lives. And then what? Lose their pensions in the 2008 financial crisis?
Yeah, because
Lose their 401ks? Lose their retirement plan completely?
the retirement age go up. Like, these past few months have been very eye-opening for me. Not just like on a level of like how the healthcare system and everything was like set up against you, but it also gives me a more of an insight on why my dad was the way he was when we were younger. I stand by. I don't think the opioid crisis was introducing opioids. I think the opioid crisis was taking them away and deciding nobody can have them unless they're literally dying. But what about the people
Yeah,
that
you have to have
feel
cancer
like it?
to get fucking opioids now.
And what if I
You'd
do?
be dying.
What if I do have cancer?
They don't care. They don't care whether we die or live. They don't give a fuck. Because they're the only game in town. That's why.
Yeah, and who cares if a poor person dies? I mean, there's other poor people that can't, afford to go to another
There's
country.
400 poor people willing to replace us in a moment.
Yeah.
So who the fuck cares about us?
Right. And I'm not trying to say like I personally deserve any type of special treatment, but I think anyone who's attempting to get help deserves help. And I'm at that point trying to get help. I can't get the help I need. I keep pushing for it.
You're making communists every day.
During a Q&A session at the aforementioned ADC conference, Renea Masri, a longtime Palestinian anti-war activist and voter in the swing state of North Carolina, questioned Georgia State Representative Ruwa Roman, who was expected to give uncommitted's planned DNC speech, about her support for Harris and criticisms of Jill Stein. Masri told MondoWise that her decision to support Stein's campaign was an easy one. During the protests that we had, and I don't think this was limited to North Carolina, we said, in November, we remember, she explained, and we meant that during the elections, we will remember those that fund the genocide. They merely changed the name from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris, but it's the same policy. So we made that promise in every protest. In November, we remember. We made the promise to our martyrs, she continued. We made the promise to our own conscience. We will not forgive the ones that fund the genocide. Amen. It's really very simple. All those individuals who are contemplating, maybe we'll vote for Kamala because Donald Trump may kill more Palestinians, they're playing mental gymnastics. If we believe that genocide is a red line, then we do not vote Democrat. It just stops there. Masri says she's found strong support for Stein within her community. The overwhelming, prevailing view that I have from members of the Palestinian community and the Arab community in general is strong opposition to Harris, which is translated through the majority for support to Jill Stein and to a lesser level for support to Donald Trump. She said, "Those I know who are voting for Harris, I can count on 2 fingers, and they are voting out of fear of Trump. Everybody else in the community is openly saying Jill Stein or Donald Trump. According to the CAIR survey, 16% of Muslim voters remain undecided, and 8.3% say they probably won't vote. Ghada El-Najjar is Muslim and a Palestinian American organizer in the swing state of Georgia. She has also lost more than 100 members of her extended family as a result of Israel's ongoing assault on Gaza. During the primaries, Ghada participated in the Listen to Georgia, Leave It Blank campaign, which was inspired by the Uncommitted National Movement. The goal was to send a clear message to then President Biden, end U.S. support for the genocide or face potential electoral consequences. Ghada says she's still undecided on whether she will vote for Harris or Stein in November. She says she hopes Harris will adopt a new course aligned with basic human rights principles, not just through rhetoric, but with actual policy changes. Unless President-elect Kamala Harris distinguishes herself from the current administration's policy on Israel and Gaza, my approach to this election remains unchanged. I remain an uncommitted voter, she told Mondo Wise. We will continue to hold Vice President Harris to the same principles. Unequivocally oppose the genocide perpetrated by the Israeli military, halt all arms shipments to Israel, call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, end the occupation of Palestinian territories, and implement a weapons embargo. She continued, if she does not take these actions, there is little difference between her and President Biden, meaning our position as a community and our voting stance will remain the same. As a lawmaker and prosecutor, I hope that as president, Kamala Harris would refuse to use U.S. taxpayer dollars to support Israel's violations of U.S. laws. Georgia voters, like Ghada, recently launched a coalition targeting the Harris campaign with specific demands. They say they will withhold their votes for Harris and vice presidential nominee Tim Walz unless the Biden-Harris administration halts all arms shipments to Israel, demands the adoption of a permanent ceasefire, and pledges to uphold U.S. law by imposing an arms embargo on nations engaged in war crimes, including Israel. As a Palestinian American who has suffered profound personal losses in Gaza, I stand firmly against injustice and oppression, says Ghada. From now until November 5th, I will continue to engage, listen, advocate, and if necessary, remain uncommitted. You're forcing people to not vote. You're forcing people to not vote.
Kamala Harris is forcing people to the couch, I hear.
Don't be uncommitted. Vote for Jill Stein. Look at her policies. We've done a cover on some of them. She has a lot of amazing policies that basically puts the American people first. She has a lot of policies putting the world itself first above her making a dollar. She wants us to have universal health care. She wants all of us to have universal education, to have free lunches for our kids at school, to be able to live your lives without being so terrified of if you can afford for your car to break down.
Or your insurance to let go and your registration be canceled.
Or what happens when you lose your job and you lose your insurance altogether. Jill Stein wants to help you. She wants to protect you. She wants to protect the people of Gaza. She understands cruelty to humans and how it's not acceptable and how it should end. Put people first.
All anybody wants is fucking austerity for the poor. Rugged individualism for the fucking poor. Socialism for the rich.
Do you have any idea what it's like not knowing if your electric will get shut off? Where your next meal's going to come from?
How are you going to feed your kids?
You get hurt, can you afford to go to a doctor because you don't have insurance because you lost your job? Like, that's the thing. Like, do you not understand what it's like? Kids can start working now. That's why Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas has several lawsuits against her about child labor and children dying on the job because you're sending 13-year-olds to work equipment you don't let under 18 work with. But Huckabee Sanders decided, well, let's just go right back and let that all happen. It's all right. It's just fine. They're just kids that's going to die. We're just going to get rid of the poor ones. We want the ones that can survive and work for the rest of their lives. We need that 45, 50 years of work.
They don't have shit on her. They don't actually attack her on the actual facts.
I don't like Kamala Harris.
It's
but
easy to attack Kamala on the actual facts. You just expose your own fucking bullshit. That's why the Republicans don't do it.
True, because they're still wanting to implement what she's doing just behind your back. Well, actually, in front of your face and more intense. This is from Counterfire. Lenin's Last Testament, the prophetic last words of a Marxist for our times. The myth that Lenin led to Stalin is exposed by Lenin's Last Testament, which argues for more democracy and removing Stalin from power.
Revolution is a word on the lips of millions, The reason is obvious. Justice for Palestine, ending the imperialist war in the Middle East, and getting climate justice are all revolutionary demands in themselves. But when we put them together, they are standards that threaten the entire capitalist system and the bankers, oil giants, and corporations that dominate our lives. That history has set us huge tasks, and their solutions require transformative politics is widely accepted despite a frenzy of propaganda to the contrary. The capitalist parties are trapped. The ghastly reality of late capitalism is educating millions that are imbued with the humanitarian solution to the crisis. Red lights are flashing, while stifling and deflecting the demands for change occupies the minds of media moguls, spin doctors, and a variety of populist bullshitters. Revolutionary politics is now at a premium, and there is a rich history of Marxist theory that can be brought to bear to convince the many that they have the collective power to bring about the transformation we need. The ruling class has made a monumental effort to bury the real history of mass revolutionary politics. Marxists as a whole, and those who have led real mass movements in particular, have been denigrated and trivialized. Since 1917 and the first successful workers' revolution in Russia, a landslide of propaganda, much of it generated by academia, has attempted to bury or distort the liberating impact of that important chapter in our history. The Russian Revolution, which gave the working class their democratic state, ended the First World War and lifted millions of the oppressed, women, Jews, national and religious minorities to political equality, was a world historic victory that shook capitalism to its core.
Fuck capitalism, it's the worst idea ever.
The idea that the working class might gain more through their organization and intelligence than waiting for reform terrifies capitalists. So the story of the revolution is told as a simplistic fairy tale involving fanatical revolutionary leaders, a gullible proletariat, and a misunderstood liberal political class. Particular venom has been heaped on Lenin. He was a man who never wore a uniform or held individual political power, and whose entire life's work was dedicated to ending class rule and oppression. Yet he has been portrayed as a ruthless manipulator, responsible for setting in train the dictatorship that came about under Stalin. That Lenin led to Stalin is not even a given, the status of a historical controversy in schools and colleges. It is accepted as fact. Academic historians, where Lenin is concerned, ignore their own advice to students to check historical analysis against the facts offered by primary sources, especially if they were written by the people involved in the controversy itself.
Which helps now because you can go on the internet and educate yourself and find the incorrect things that you have been told, because our history books have been drastically, I'm going to say, whitewashed to show that, we didn't do any kind of atrocities, but we did several atrocities. And there's things that, there was just campaigning against Lenin and Stalin and communism and socialism and all these big words that we didn't like because we wanted money, and the top wanted money. So that's why they demonize and label them with these big scary words like socialism and communism, because it's integrated into us to fear those things without actually knowing what they are.
This brings us onto a document known as Lenin's Testament. The testament was dictated by Lenin as he lay dying in Gorky. Nobody has ever seriously criticized the testament as a forgery, and as primary sources go, it is pretty much bulletproof. It says what Lenin meant very clearly. The problem with it is that it destroys, in a few short sentences, the myth that Lenin led to Stalin. Lenin's illness and untimely death at 53 was brought about because of his selfless work rate. He never stopped worrying about the revolution in which he had played a leading part. The documents referred to below were dictated after he suffered several strokes and had been forced to retire to his sanatorium. 3 letters to the Central Committee plus Lenin's testament specifically warns against Stalin, show that Stalinism was not grown from Leninism. Reference to the 3 letters is included because they help make sense of Lenin's testament. This is the ABC of historical investigation. Students are always advised to study primary sources in context. It is surprising how many academics have statistically avoided this when writing about Lenin. The content of the 3 letters shows Lenin's determination to stop communism from becoming a dictatorship, and how he saw the inclusion of workers in decision-making as the best solution. They were serious dangers to the worker state, and they were mainly from the bureaucracy for which Stalin was becoming the spokesperson. The workers' revolution had been ravaged by a civil war that was funded and backed by imperialist countries, Britain, Germany, France, Japan, and the United States, and the ensuing famine coupled with deaths at the front of the wiped out large number of workers. The danger was that with a tiny proportion of workers set against millions of peasants, the Communist Party would become the government rather than the workers, and the politics of Marxism would give way to administrative necessity. The Civil War had required the state-led large-scale organization to keep munitions, food, and civil society going. This situation led to the increasing use of experts and managers who could use the Civil War to override opposition from the workers. These decision-makers and experts were largely recruited from the old Tsarist state. They were functionaries who emerged as self-interested layer that acted without any understanding of or sympathy with Marxism. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was formed in 1922 to spread communism and give full equity to states that had to live under the heel of Tsarism for centuries. Lenin was concerned that the bureaucracy could act to split the Communist Party. The bureaucracy wanted to increase executive power and less democratic opposition. Stalin was, more than anything, an administrator who favored getting things done over developing political leadership. Stalin and the bureaucracy bullied and threatened anyone who didn't fall in with their diktat, especially when opposition to Moscow arose in one or other of the Soviet republics. Lenin also worried that the Central Committee was itself a problem. It was too small and too bound up in cliques, and where personalities were dominating the discussion. He knew he would soon die, and that the end of his leading role would be another potential cause of division. His solution was on par with everything he stood for. Lenin's entire works was an articulation of the politics of the working class as a revolutionary class, against capitalism, against war and imperialism, and for a society that produced to satisfy human needs. And this was with him to an end. The answer to all these issues was to turn to the revolutionary workers. In Lenin's testament, he outlines the problems he foresaw arising out of factional divisions. His predictions proved to be accurate. Lenin used his testament to try to get the existing Central Committee to put politics first and work together. After his testament had been dictated, Lenin discovered that Stalin had been aggressive, sexist, and obscene towards his wife, and he had an addendum that specifically warned that Stalin should be removed from any important leading role. The 3 letters that Lenin dictated in December 1923 advocated practical political steps to widen the leadership of the Communist Party and limit the executive power of the state. Lenin's letter to Congress says clearly that what he thinks is the most important change must be set an increase in the number of Central Committee members to a few dozen or even 100. He was irritated by the CC's cliquish habits and saw increasing numbers of the workers on the CC as essential because they would do a thorough job of improving our administrative machinery and prevent conflicts between small sections of the CC from acquiring excessive importance for the future of the party by tying the leadership more closely to the workers. He hoped for a more disciplined and politicized CC, not one obsessed with administration.
Had too many drinks. A few days later, Lenin dictated a longer letter in the form of notes about the State Planning Commission Gosplan. Economic planning was an area where the bureaucracy clashed with the political leadership, and Lenin worried that the experts would thwart the socialist purpose of industrialization. This was going to be crucial as foreign powers sought to encircle the USSR. It is worth noting here that the bureaucracy was going to take control of state planning in the Stalinist era, and the result would be war on the peasants that killed at least 5 million of them. We can say for certain that Lenin foresaw some such possibility, and he argued strongly in the favor of the current communist leadership of Gosplan. He favored giving Gosplan legislative power on the condition that it was done with the democratic consent of Congress, and that it was set with many constraints and opportunities to review progress. This is how Lenin sought to square the circle of centralized state planning and democratic accountability. We might wonder what he would say about Starmer's complete surrender of economic policy to the Treasury. Lenin's third, and in many ways most important intervention, was titled The Question of Nationalities or Autonomization. This refers to the national question involving non-Russian states. In this document, he makes it clear what an odious role Stalin and his henchmen had played in Georgia. Lenin was appalled to hear how Stalin's henchmen had used the most hateful bullying reminiscent of the Tsarist state to bring the Georgians into line with Moscow's ruling. Violence towards other socialist states in the name of national unity was crude and reactionary. It was to be another hallmark of the Stalinist dictatorship. Lenin, despite being near to death, hits the nail right on the head. It was said in Georgia that a united apparatus was needed. Where did that assurance come from? Did it not come from the same Russian apparatus which, as I pointed out in one of the preceding sections of my diary, we took over from Tsarism and slightly anointed with Soviet oil? He followed this up by excoriating the bureaucracy and their rule. But now, we must in all conscience admit the apparatus we call ours is, in fact, still quite alien to us. It is a bourgeoisie and Tsarist hodgepodge, and there has been no possibility of getting rid of it in the course of the past 5 years without the help of other countries, and because we have been busy most of the time with military engagements and the fight against famine. And on Stalin's role in this, Lenin says, I think that Stalin's haste and his infuriation with pure administration, together with his spite against the socialist states, played a fatal role here. In politics, spite generally plays the basis of rules. It is not difficult to understand why Stalin later considered every Leninist to be dangerous and systematically killed them. On his deathbed, Lenin dictated what needed to be said to the Central Committee. He also wanted to be published in Pravda so that the public could have Lenin's criticisms and recommendations verbatim. Lenin's last testament should be read in full to appreciate why, unequivocally, Leninism and Stalinism were polar opposites. Lenin wanted to increase the size of the CC, to make it more representative, less prone to splits, and to use working class comrades to make it stick to a socialist agenda. He wanted to cut down the power of the bureaucracy and saw developing working class leadership as key. And although Lenin only comes out openly and decisively against Stalin in the addendum, he makes it clear before then that Stalin has concentrated enormous power in his hands and doesn't exercise that power with sufficient caution. Some have argued that Lenin, although he was dying, should have come out on the side of Trotsky and cast Stalin to the wolves. But, as stated earlier, Lenin didn't like leadership cults. The Testament makes criticism and praises strengths in equal measure. He is more critical of himself in many of the documents referred to here than he is of others. He didn't come out as hard on Stalin as he could have because he hoped that the personalities would see his purpose and try to form a collective leadership. He makes it abundantly clear that the collective leadership had to be Marxist, and anyone with minimal knowledge of the history must see what that meant for worker states and the spread of revolution to other countries. The Testament does pick out Trotsky as the outstanding Marxist on the CC, but because Trotsky had offended others, he was cautious not to overstate his case. What is certain is that everything Lenin says in the Testament helps to explain why Stalin emerged as the dominant force and Trotsky was marginalized. Trotsky and Lenin were at one on the need to cut down the bureaucracy. They were at one with the need to uphold socialist relations with other socialist states. And they were united against the great Russian chauvinist bullies that had more in common with Tsarism than Bolshevism. Lastly, Lenin and Trotsky were adamant that the revolution would not survive unless it spread to other countries, and the conservative Russian nationalists who were to denounce this as adventurism in the Stalinist era were completely invested in the power of the bureaucracy. Taking up an internationalist, anti-imperialist policy, just as with Palestine today, would expose the limitations of the bureaucrats and their reactionary role. After Lenin's funeral, the CC met to discuss his last words. They decided not to publish it, as Lenin had requested. They each had different motives, but that does not excuse a disastrous mistake. The refusal to publish meant there was also a refusal to accept the responsibility of collective leadership. It also gifted the bureaucracy and Stalin a license to use their power shamelessly to sideline Trotsky and turn Marxism away from a struggle for world revolution and into a dogma serving Red Russian nationalism. Stalin's dictatorship turned workers' democracy into its opposite, a state capitalist country, where the goal was to serve the same gods of economic growth and imperialism that existed in the West. National independence in the USSR was crushed. Internationally, Stalinism all but destroyed the meaning of Marxism. Genuine Marxists were the first to face Stalin's terror, along with their families and friends. But Lenin might get the last word after all. There is a crisis gripping the world that is forging common interests and understandings that demand a return to the genuine Marxist traditions for which Lenin gave his life. Today, there is a social democratic collapse on one flank and a populist reaction on the other. Never has a Leninist party of the working class and the oppressed been as important as it is today. Revolution doesn't have to end in a dictatorship. And if Lenin's last words had been heeded, it might have been avoided in Russia. But what do we do when we have somebody that has a radical socialist idea? We ignore them, we demonize them, and we use media propaganda to just make them out to be evil.